All right, so section 2.1, part C, this is the last part of section 2.1, has to do with solving absolute value equations. So absolute values, you can see at the very bottom, there's like two vertical lines and there's a variable inside. Those are absolute value notation. But there's something you guys have to know about absolute values. The absolute values always, well, 99% of the time, they have two answers. Okay, there are some times when there's only one. Okay, and there are times where there's none. Okay, so how do we figure out how to solve them? Well, this is what you're going to do. Anytime you have an absolute value, let's just put the absolute value of x equal to c. Anytime I ask you to solve for something like this, now x and c, there's just, x is a variable, c, we're just going to say it's some kind of number, okay, a constant. That's why we use the letter c in algebra for constants. So it could be absolute value of x equal to 7, absolute value of x equals to -3. This is what you're supposed to do. You're going to break it up into two parts, okay? So I'm going to write that down right here. Break this up into two parts. Okay, and it's pretty easy how to do it. The first part is just rewriting the problem without the absolute values. So x equals to c. And the second part is almost identical, but you're going to notice one change. You make it equal to the negative of the original value. Okay? So x is equal to c, x is equal to -c. Okay? So whenever you see an absolute value equation, you're going to break it up into two parts. Now there's a couple things that you guys should know. Absolute values should never equal negative answers. Okay, an absolute value should never equal to a negative answer. And that should make sense because you guys learned this before, right, when you were younger. What happens anytime you put anything into an absolute value? Like, what's the absolute value of -5?
5.
5, right? What's the absolute value of 3?
3.
3, right? The absolute value of a positive number is always a positive number. The absolute value of a negative number is always a positive answer, right? So the absolute value always gives you positive solutions, okay? So that's why the absolute value should never give you a negative answer. Okay, the real reason why absolute values don't give you negative answers is because absolute values are considered to be a distance, the distance from 0. Okay, so whenever they say what's the absolute value of 2, so if I were to write this down right here, the absolute value of 2 means how far is 2 from 0? That's the question. Whenever you see the absolute value of 2, what they're asking you is how far is it? And you guys all know, they should have told you this many years back, distance is never negative, right? If I make you run a mile forward, right? Running in a forward direction, you run a mile, right? If you run a mile forward, that means you ran a mile. And then if I tell you, okay, now run it backwards, right? Like pedaling backwards. Do you undo the distance? No, you just run 2 miles, one in a normal direction, one in a weird direction, right? Distance can never be undone. Whenever you walk forward, backwards, whatever, it counts as positive distance. A perfect example is a car. The car has an odometer, and the odometer tells you how far the car has traveled. It doesn't matter if you go forward or in reverse. It's still going to count those miles, right? So absolute value tells you distance from 0, okay? So even if I were to say like the absolute value of -4, that means how far is -4 from 0? And by the way, the answers to those questions that we have up there, this would be 2, and this would be 4. right? 2 units, 4 units. Just think of the number line. It's 4 units away. Whether it's negative or positive side, it's 4 steps if it's negative 4, or it's 2 steps if you're at 2. Okay, so anytime you take the absolute value, you're always finding distance. So you should never see a problem where it says the absolute value of this equals to a negative answer. That's just weird. Okay, so, all right. This is kind of the intro to it. Okay, this part right here, I'm going to highlight it just to make sure that you guys have that. Okay, very important. Okay. So the absolute value should never be equal to negative answers. All right. Now maybe we can simplify it and it goes away, but if that's all that's left, then we got a problem. So here we go. Remember, all we're doing is breaking it up. Sometimes these problems are super easy, like this one's going to be really easy, and sometimes they're a little bit more difficult. Okay? But here we go. Solve each equation. And example number 1 says the absolute value of n is equal to 6. Now remember, what we're supposed to be doing is breaking this up into 2 pieces. So here's the first piece. N equals 6. The other piece should say n equals what? Negative 6. And then I'm supposed to solve, but can I solve anything else now? Or am I done? I'm done. N equals 6. N equals negative 6. That's it. Your problem's done. That was easy, right? Now, if you can, I would appreciate it if you guys get into the practice of writing your answers as sets, okay? Since there's 2 solutions for the variable n, then it'd be nice if you write them as a set, okay? It's this or this, right? If you don't, I'm not going to mark you wrong on a test, but I really would appreciate if you guys do that, because that's really the way the state tests do it, right? Whenever there's multiple answers for one letter, they're going to write them out as a set. And I don't want you guys to look at this and say, what does that mean? I don't understand what that is, right? So here's our solution, okay? All right, so let's move on. Now notice this one doesn't look as small. Okay, it's a little bit extra. There's that -2 there. Okay? Now remember how I told you guys that absolute values always tend to have 2 solutions, right? But sometimes there's one, sometimes there's none. Whenever the absolute value is equal to 0, we get into the situation where there's only one answer, and you'll see why right now. Okay? So because it says equals 0, it presents a specific case. So I have it there. I'm going to split it up into 2 problems. V minus 2 is equal to 0, and V minus 2 is equal to, and I'm going to probably change this later, but I forgot to do this in the previous problem, just to highlight the fact that that's what changed, right? The thing in green, that's the new thing. Is there such a thing as -0? No, right? So let me just rewrite that part right here. V minus 2 equals to 0. Now you notice how both of the equations are identical? So I really don't have to solve 2 equations. If I solve one, I solve both, right? So if I add 2 over here, I get V equals to 2. If I wanted to solve the other one, I can do that too. I'll do it just for the sake of doing it. So how many answers do I have? How many different answers? Just one, right? I have one answer. There's not 2 different. It's 2 and 2, so the same. So your answer is just V equals to 2, and that's it. So whenever your absolute value says equals 0, there's a good chance there's only one answer. Okay? And if you don't mind, I'm going to go up really quick. I'm going to change this up in the notes just to kind of make it obvious that that's the different thing. Okay, that's what you did different. It's a negative at the end. So, I mean, does this seem like it's totally difficult so far? I mean, it's not terrible, right? Obviously, it's got to get a little more challenging. So here's your next one, example number 3. Remember, we're doing 6 of them. They're gradually starting to get more difficult, okay? So the absolute value of 10n plus 8 is equal to 62. and I got to create two different equations. Okay? So, let me change this here. 10n plus 8 equals to 62, and 10n plus 8 is equal to negative 62. And now I got to solve two problems. So every problem has a potential of becoming two problems. Okay? So on the left side, let me subtract 8 on both sides. So that's going to give me 10n is equal to 62 minus 8, that's 54. And then I'm going to divide everything by 10. So we'll divide by 10. So n is equal to 54 over 10. If I reduce it, becomes 27 over 5. Or if you want to write 5.4, that works too. But since I'm doing it by hand, I'm just going to reduce using fractions. And there you go. I just divided 54 and 10 by 2. Now let's go to the right side. I'm going to subtract 8. So that's going to give me 10n equal to negative 70. And then just like I did in the other problem, I'm going to divide by 10. So n is equal to negative 7. And that's it. I'm done. I do want you guys to notice, right now I'll erase this, but check this out. Minus 8 on both sides, right? I did that on both equations. And then I did the division by 10 on both equations, right? The reason is because it's the same problem, just a different number on the right side. So you'll do the same process a lot of times, okay? So just kind of note that. It's very common. So we're just going to write our answers as a set, and then we'll move on. I like to write the smallest numbers first and then go to the biggest ones. That's usually the way it's written on state exams. So the smaller answers go towards the left, and then they keep getting bigger as you move to the right. Remember, 27 over 5 is the same as 5.4 if you want to write the decimal. Are we okay so far? Any questions? All right. Example 4. So we're getting into these problems where the absolute value isn't all by itself, right? If you look at example 1, 2, and 3, you'll notice like number 1 just said absolute value of n. Number 2 said absolute value of v minus 2. Number 3 said the absolute value of 10n minus 8 or plus 8. I forgot which one it was. But it was just that, the absolute value, all on one side. Okay? Now I'm going to complicate things. I'm going to get an absolute value of x, and I'm going to divide it by 7. Okay? What you want to do is you want to leave the absolute value all by itself. You want to clean it up. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get this division by 7 out of there. How do I get rid of division by 7? What's the opposite to division? Multiplication. So let's multiply by 7. I'm going to multiply by 7. I'm going to put a little x with the circle. That means that's what I'm doing. I'm multiplying that way. So this is the absolute value of x equals to 35. I multiplied both sides by 7, but I don't like writing it that way. I just draw an arrow and I said I'm setting this over here by multiplying. Okay? All right, now let's break it up into two parts. X equals 35. X equals negative 35. And is there anything else I can do at this point? No, I'm done, right? So let's write my answers. X equals negative 35, bless you, and 35. Okay? If you want to write, some of you guys may have seen teachers write plus or minus 35. That's okay with me too. I don't mind. But just to keep it kind of orderly, I'm going to write it as two different pieces. Bless you, Bella. All right, so let's move on. So, example number 5. 2 times the absolute value of n plus 10 is equal to negative 4. So 2 times the absolute value of n plus 10 is equal to negative 4. All right, so I can't have the absolute value have things next to it. So that 2 that's right next to it, the 2 times the absolute value of n plus 10, how do I get rid of a 2 times?
Distribute.
Well, I can't distribute into an absolute value. So good thing you said that, because you cannot distribute into an absolute value. I would do subtract by 2 if it was adding, but it's not adding, it's multiplying. So divide. Yeah, let's divide it out, okay? Remember, this is 2 times that. So in order to undo multiplication, you got to do the opposite, division, right? You got to ask yourself, what's going on in that problem? That's multiplying, so let's divide it out, okay? Now, if it looked like this, then I would say let's subtract 2, because 2 is adding to it, right? So you have to look at what's happening with the number, and this number right here is multiplying into. We cannot distribute. Remember, no distribution in absolute values. That's not legal. Don't do that. Okay, you're not gonna get arrested, but mathematically it's not sound. That's what we say. It's not mathematically sound. So we are gonna divide both sides by 2. So now I have the absolute value of n plus 10 equal to negative 2. What should I do next? This is kind of a trick question, so think about it. What are we supposed to do?
Subtract 10.
Well, we can't subtract 10 yet. But yes, eventually, but not yet.
With the other one.
Sorry?
With the other two. The positive 2.
So break it up. I'm supposed to break it up and then make the other one a plus 2, right? So she said break it up. And I would say, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But I'm not going to do that. What did I say in the very beginning? I highlighted it.
Should never equal negative 1.
An absolute value should never equal to a negative number. Is that what we have right here? Yeah. No solution. Here's the tricky part about this. If you forget and you start doing the work, you will find 2 answers. And you're not going to know that you messed up. Okay, it's not going to break apart or anything, and all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, of course, there was a negative, that's why. You're not going to know. If you go ahead and start solving, you're going to get 2 different answers. You'll get n equal to negative 12 and n equal to negative 8. You'll find 2 solutions, and you're going to feel good about it. But the thing is, you didn't notice that your absolute value was equal to a negative number. Okay? When that happens, no solution. Okay? Because when can the distance to anything be negative? Never. Right? Distance can't be negative. That's what the absolute value is. It's a distance, right? That's the idea, is that it's a distance. So if it's a distance, it can't be negative. Okay, so right here we say no solution. I'm going to kind of highlight the little error part right here. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. This part right here is a problem. Okay? That's the problem. The fact that it's negative. All right, one more and then we're done, guys. Like I said, this is all stuff you're going to be seeing in your homework. You'll see some problems where the absolute value is equal to a negative number. So you should right away say, oh, he said that that's not possible. No solution. Last one. And these are like some of the harder looking ones. So right here is one of those things where what you said earlier, Ashley, right? When you told me to subtract the 2 and I said, well, I can't because that's multiplication, right? I don't want to subtract the 9. But I could subtract that 5, because see how the 5 says plus 5? So I can do minus 5. I can undo it, right? I can do the opposite of it. So I am going to subtract 5, but I'm not going to subtract 9. I'm going to divide 9 eventually, okay? So you got to look to see what's there and ask yourself, what is it doing? It's adding? Well, then let me subtract it. What about the 9? Well, 9 is multiplying, so let me divide it, right? You always undo. You do the opposite to solve, okay? So I'm going to start off by subtracting 5 on both sides. So let's subtract 5. So this is going to give me 9. Absolute value of 6 plus 3m is equal to 27. All right, so far so good. No negative showed up on the right side yet, nothing like that. Now I see 9 times the absolute value, so let's get rid of times by dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by 9. That'll get rid of that 9 in the front. So now I have the absolute value of 6 plus 3m equals to 3. And now I have it the way I want it. I want the absolute value all by itself. So at this point, break them apart into 2 problems. Okay? Break it up into 2 problems. So first problem is going to say 6 plus 3m equals to 3. And then the second problem is going to say 6 plus 3m equals to negative 3. And then you just got to solve both of them. So let's start off with the left side. What's my first step in solving on the left equation? Subtract 6, thank you. So minus 6 on both sides, that's 3m equal to negative 3. And then my last step for that one? Divided by 3, thank you. So dividing by 3, m is equal to negative 1. One answer down. Notice I'm going to take the same steps on the other one. I'm going to subtract 6. So I get 3m equal to negative 9. And then I'm going to divide by 3. Just like I did in the previous problem, or the previous part. So m is equal to negative 3. I got 2 different solutions. So m equals negative 3 and negative 1. And this is what you guys are going to be doing for your homework.